Hi, welcome to RCSB Florida. In this video I'm going to show you stills and video taken with the Sony A7R IV. This is supposed to be an amazing camera, and this is literally the first time I have ever used the camera. I've been shooting the A7R III for almost a year and love it, but the A7R IV is supposed to be a better focusing camera than the R3. For shooting stills, it is also supposed to be the best high megapixel camera on the market today. The Canon R5 is pretty close, but I chose to stick with Sony for several reasons. In fact, I have gone all in for Sony. I just sold all of my Canon gear and pre-ordered the new Sony A7S III for doing video. I have waited a long time for 4K at 120 frames per second. I had hoped that Canon would give it to me and I would go back to Canon. As my longtime viewers know, I shot Canon for over 2 decades. Well, they gave it to me, but it overheats. Sony gave it to me in the A7S III, and it doesn't overheat. I have the A7S III on pre-order now and hope to get it in October, if I'm lucky. Sony has already announced that there may be a delay in shipment because the orders have far exceeded their expectations. They are now shipping cameras to customers who pre-ordered, but I am way down the list when it comes to pre-orders. So I'll be lucky to get it in October, as I said. I also don't have to use adapters to use my Sony glass, which I would have to do with Canon since all of my Canon glass was EF mount and not R mount. Because of that and other issues, I decided to go with Sony. I hope they don't disappoint me. Enough about gear, let's get into the video. On my first time out, I decided to go where I know I can generally find lots of flying birds. The best subject to try out a new camera on is BIF, birds in flight. I was looking for birds that dive into the water to find fish. That would be ospreys, pelicans, terns, and gulls. Those are the most common species you find around salt water. This location is also where I have found Reddish Egrets, which are one of my favorite birds to photograph, and you'll see why in a moment. I arrived about sunrise and headed to a beach where I have found birds in the past. Well, bummer. There was nothing there. I think because there was about a 25 to 30 mile per hour wind blowing and the wind was coming right into the beach, making the surf a little on the rough side. I did find several flowers to photograph, so I got those shots and headed for the leeward side of the island where the wind was at my back. Perfect for flying birds because they always land into the wind, so they would be coming right at me. That was a good decision because I found lots of birds. Here are several sequence shots of a brown pelican diving into the water after a meal. It's amazing how these large birds streamline their body as they enter the water. I always love watching these big birds feeding. There were hundreds of gulls and terns doing the same thing, but they are so quick they are far more difficult to capture, especially the terns. Here's a 13-frame sequence of a brown pelican diving into the water. As you can see, the A7R IV does a pretty good job of maintaining focus for all 13 frames as he dives. Here's a sandwich tern as it dives into the water at a really fast speed to grab its breakfast. Here are a few more sequence shots. There were lots of schools of small fish and the terns were going crazy. I finally decided to zoom back for a wider view to show you how crazy it was. With so many birds diving into the water, it was almost impossible to focus on just one bird. They were so close together and going in every direction. It was a feeding frenzy. Here are a few shots of the sandwich terns when they weren't diving. I was lucky to see a group of frigate birds flying high in the air. These are not great shots because of how high they were, but it is not a bird you see every day. Now for the Reddish Egrets. This bird actually found me. I was on the beach shooting other birds when out of the corner of my eye I see this beautiful creature heading right for me. I quickly took a few stills and then started shooting video of this crazy bird, which is a female I believe, and her mate or boyfriend showed up later, as you'll see. These birds are a blast to watch and photograph with their fishing habits. They run around and spread their wings like a crazy bird. They are about the only bird that does this except the tricolored heron, which does almost the same thing but not with quite as much flair as the Reddish Egret. Here the male flies in and starts following her as she is feeding. He makes a gesture which I assume is a courting gesture, and it looks like she says, "Buzz off, dude, this is my fishing hole." I think the female response to his courting gesture there didn't go over well. He starts kind of barking away, kind of grumpy, and heads towards this snowy egret who backs up, kind of looks like, "What's wrong with you, dude?" and kind of turns around and walks off. but he gets over it pretty quickly and goes back to feeding. These birds are very hard to videotape when they're doing this. Unfortunately, I had my gimbal head on, which is what I normally use with the 200 to 600, and it's not a very good head for doing video. It's not fluid head, so it's great for what it does for stills, but it's not as smooth as it needs to be. So it's kind of a struggle to try and get a good smooth pan or tilt with it. I had it set up pretty fair here. Nothing up my sleeve. Nothing up this sleeve either. Not quite sure why they do that, but most egrets do that. Sometimes you can see they're actually straightening their feathers. There you got one. Missed it the first time. Then he starts running around like crazy. You'll notice here in a minute he'll move his foot, really shake his foot under the water. Right there you see it, and that scared the prey, so then it ran between his legs, and he had to turn around to get it. And then he's off again. Then he decides he's going to get out on the bank and walk. He's still making the kind of barking sound that he's making, which I assume he was doing at the female who you just saw go by. And he walks on down the beach. These guys entertained me for almost an hour until they suddenly departed the scene. The female flew first and the male was right behind her. It seemed like wherever she went, he followed. Typical male. These are some of the other photos I was able to capture. I believe this is an old navigation platform that's no longer in use, but the structure still stands out there and collects birds. As you can see, you can zoom in quite a ways with the A7R4 and still maintain good quality because of the high resolution. I don't know about you, but I love large ships. I don't have any desire to go out to sea on one, but I love to look at them. This location offers a lot of opportunity to see large ships coming in and out of Tampa's port. Here are a few of the ships I saw while I was at the beach. There were huge tanker ships coming in to unload at the port of Tampa and supply us with fuel and oil products. I was at the beach for about 5 hours, and I was surprised at how many ships came and went during that time. Here's a picture of one of the pilot boats that go out to meet the ships before they get into the channel that leads to the port. Because it can sometimes be difficult and hazardous to navigate the channel leading into the port of Tampa, the ships are required by law to bring a pilot captain aboard to pilot the ship into the port. These boats take the pilots out to the ship to board it and steer it into the port. The same is true for leaving the port. The pilot captain takes the ship back to the open Gulf, and these boats bring them back in. Not exactly bird photography, but I thought you might be interested in learning something new. Well, that was the result of my first outing with the A7R4. It will take a few times to get really comfortable with the new camera, but it is in many ways just like the A7R3 with a more comfortable grip and a few different settings. but really close to having exactly the same menu as the A7R3, with only a few exceptions. I set it up to almost match my R3, so it wasn't that much of a difference. I really like the feel of the camera in my hand with a larger grip. However, that is ergonomics, and that isn't why I bought this camera. What about the quality of the images? I have heard a lot from other photographers just rave about this camera's quality images and how good the resolution is at 61 megapixels. It has great resolution, but it is hard to really see a lot of difference from the A7R3 unless you zoom way in. It does focus way better than the A7R3, especially with video. The better focusing with video is why I bought the camera in the first place. The biggest complaint I have is the noise. At times it is unforgiving, and you really need to pay careful attention to your settings. It doesn't always take a really high ISO for the camera to get noisy in certain situations. I'm talking about ISO 250, which I consider to be a low ISO. If I didn't have Topaz Denoise AI, some of these images would not have been that good. I was trying something new by shooting RAW with compressed images, but that is said to make very little difference, according to photographers that I trust. I normally shoot RAW uncompressed plus large JPEG. I was only at ISO 250, which is very low for me. I've been shooting ISO 400 or above with the A7R3 to get my shutter speed up high enough for bird-in-flight photography, and I had very little problems with noise until I got above 800 or higher, and then it wasn't as bad as this camera. I know the higher in megapixels you go, the worse the noise can get, but this is far worse than the R3. Next time I'm going to try shooting uncompressed files at a lower ISO and see how much difference that makes, if any. I also usually shoot RAW plus JPEG so I can see the images on my Windows Explorer screen. In my normal workflow, I delete all the bad images and videos before I start processing. With high megapixel cameras, the storage space required will kill you if you don't. The A7R3 files are about 60 megabytes and the A7R4 files are over 100 megabytes and can go up as high as 120. That eats up storage fast if you don't get rid of all your bad images that you'll never use anyway. If you shoot continuous high plus when trying to get bird and flight photos, you can eat up a lot of shots, and most of them you will never use even if they are in focus. Sometimes focusing fails and you then have a lot of out of focus shots you need to get rid of or buy more storage. Getting rid of bad shots is far cheaper. All that being said, I will continue working with the A7R4 to find the sweet spot and the settings that will give me what I want and be as noise free as possible. Even then, I think Topaz Denoise AI will remain my best friend when it comes to images from the A7R4. I'm really looking forward to getting the A7S III in a few weeks. I can't wait to get my hands on 4K at 120 frames per second. Shooting video with this should be spectacular as long as it focuses as well or better than the A9 II, and I hope it does. I didn't say where I was this time, but I'm sure many of you have been there yourself. So, where was I? I've done videos from this location several times. Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of my videos, please hit the subscribe button. I would really appreciate that. Hit the bell button if you want to be notified when I post a new video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and be safe out there. Oh, and get out and shoot. You can't learn to be a better photographer sitting on your couch. If I can do it, so can you. So get out there.